One problem that faces amateur photographers with regard to making intricate and careful cutouts is the fact that we just don't do enough of it to raise our skill levels. And we looked at this in video 51. Now, I've experienced these same issues as well, and I adopted a technique that we looked at in video 37 called strategic colour. That's where I use a layer mask and I work entirely manually, but we can ask the question, is that a slower process than making selections, particularly with some of the auto options we have? Now, in the hands of a select and mask expert, someone who's using these tools almost daily, we could probably say yes, but we're not experts. That's the issue here. So for us amateurs, is my manual masking technique a slower process for us? Well, now it becomes quite debatable. We need to remember too that creating a cutout destined for a small web-based image is one thing. To make a cutout to the standard that could make a large print is quite another. My method has been tried and tested because I've had many prints made up to 24 inches on the long side and even bigger, so I know the technique works fine. Another issue is that different images of course require a different approach, and some composite images may not require a cutout at all. Here's an example with these 4 birds, which I felt I could put together in a panoramic way. Selecting all of these, I open them up into Photoshop from Bridge, Tools, Photoshop, and I had them put straight into Photoshop's layers. Now, once I did that, I was able to extend the canvas to about 3 times the width of each of these images and just stagger them along in a row. So you can see the next image, when I turn it on, is just overlapping the one before, or this one is overlapping this one, and so on and so on. Let's start with the one on the right. So here, all I needed to do was select my second one. There you can see the overlap. So all I've got to do here is to apply a layer mask to this layer, this one here. Once we've got the layer mask, we can go to our toolbox on the left, select black. I'm going to select my gradient tool. The option that I want is in the basics, and it's this one, foreground to transparent. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see exactly what we're going to do. Now the beak of the bird probably comes down to here, so I'll start there and just drag a little bit to the left. Now you can see I can go too far, but I can choose exactly where things start and stop. And within a very short time, I've got those 2 images blended together, and all I would need to do was to complete the other 2. Now, as you can see, as I work through all of those masks and not a selection in sight, I still managed to create the composite, and I closed the birds up so they had a little bit more of a relationship between each one, a little crop, and then we can do any final editing. Now, not every cutout needs to be a lengthy or tedious thing to do, and here I just want to select the yellow balloon. Now, what I would often do here is I would crop it. I would just crop the balloon just to make life a little easier. Otherwise, if I choose select subject, it's very likely or almost certain to select the blue balloon at the bottom, and then I'd have to remove that selection. So there we can select the subject. It should have no difficulty here. But what I often do is soften that edge line just a tiny amount. Now we can go to any one of the selection tools and then select and mask. All I'm referring to here is the feather radius of the selection we've made. I'm going to overtype this 0.5. You can see it's just taken the sharpness away from the edge here. So when I click OK, now I'm going to apply a mask. I'm going to remove the lock first. and I'll apply the mask. And there we have our balloon removed from its background. Quite easy now to take that into our composite. And all I've done here is to copy my balloon another 2 times, rotated the balloon very slightly, and also reduced the size. I positioned them in a strong composition within the frame, and I can apply a new sky. A little tip, I've just sampled the 2 colours that originally came with that yellow balloon. So I opened up the image and I used my eyedropper tool from the toolbox to sample the foreground colour and the background colour. Now using my gradient tool here, and I'm using the option foreground to background. If I click and drag down, you can see I can create a nice natural sky for my composite. Now, trying to cut out effectively a car like this from its background is going to take us quite some time, because this is the other end of the scale when we're talking about composites. Let me take a look at selecting the subject. I'm sure it'll do a reasonable job in some places. Now, we can either do what I suggested in one of our other videos, where we take that selection and we move on from there. But what I did with this was to create a layer mask, and I actually did the entire cutout with a soft brush. Now, the benefits to that is the soft brush gives the edge of the car a nice, gentle and natural look. But what I also did was, every time I did 10 minutes, 15 minutes on the car, as soon as I got a little bit bored, I would save it as a Photoshop file, and I could come back another day and do a little more. I actually cut this car out over a number of weeks, probably a couple of months. So let me demonstrate this process again by first applying a layer mask. I need black as my foreground colour. I need a standard soft edge brush. I need my flow rate to be 100%, and I need the image greatly enlarged. At this stage, it would be a good idea to save this as a Photoshop file. So we've got the save ready and prepared for when we get bored with what we're doing and we take a break. I make my brush fairly small, and I'm going to start on the edge somewhere, click, hold the shift key and click in short steps. Now on corners we take shorter steps and we can go around some quite tight corners. On the straight edges we can go a lot faster. When we run out of picture, I'm just resting my thumb on the spacebar. I can click and drag. Still with my finger on the shift key, I can now continue. And once you get into this little technique, you'll find that you'll actually get on much faster than you probably appreciated. And what I did here was to go around the entire outside of the car first. Now, to save you and me a great deal of time, to demonstrate the next stage of this cutout, I've just selected around that roof. So I need to touch my Alt key to click the mask so we can just see the mask in its entirety. What I need to do now is to select everything around the outer edge, so I can do that with the magic wand. Just click into that area. It looks pretty good, but if we zoom in, we'll notice that we are just a couple of pixels short. If we go in far enough, we can actually see quite clearly. 2 or 3 pixels is all we need. So we need to expand that selection so it jumps into the middle of that black line, so it doesn't leave any of that white. We do that with Select, Modify, Expand. 3 pixels, that should do it. Now I'll hit Control 0 so you can see the entire mask. Now I need to flood that selection with black. Alt Backspace will do that. I'll remove the selection to get it out of our eye line. Control D will do that. So when I turn on the little eye here, we're just looking at the roof. But with a bit more work, we could be looking at the entire car. So I saved this as a Photoshop file, and I just come back as and when I felt the need to do a little more. It did take quite some time, but there wasn't any rush. Here we're just looking at the mask, of course, and if I switch everything back on by clicking the little eye, you can see the car is nicely cut out, including all the intricate details. And because the spokes are straight, if we use that shift click method where we're holding that shift key while we're making straight lines, even that is nowhere near as tedious as we first imagined. I'll see you next time.